Welcome to another edition of the Powell Press. I am State Senator Bobby Powell Jr., representing Senate District 30 in Palm Beach County. And this is the week of February 28th through March 4th of 2022, the 8th week of the legislative session. Now, this week continued the long parade of anti-freedom legislation in the Florida Senate. Let's get into it. Monday began with HB1467, the Don't Say Gay bill. That bill was up in the Appropriations Committee on Monday. This measure targets young children in our public school system, banning instruction about gender identity or sexual orientation in the classroom. Tuesday's meeting of the Rules Committee was more of the same. With HB1467, this was legislation banning books and the teaching of certain things in our classrooms, but also speaking of teaching, we had HB7. This was known as the anti-woke legislation and the critical race theory bill, which bans certain teachings of African American history in certain classrooms that would make people feel guilt or anguish when being instructed by a teacher. Both of these pieces of legislation passed exclusively on party line votes, with all of the Republicans in support and the Democrats against. I voted against all of these measures. It strikes me as particularly ironic and hypocritical that the governor and lawmakers continue to harp on this idea of freedom. At the same time, they're on a mission to restrict it for those in the minority communities. Why is the freedom that many blacks fought for and died for during the civil rights movement any less precious than the freedom for others? And why should this freedom be surrendered? That's the real question. On Wednesday, it was on to Senate Bill 1808, banning flights of immigrant children into the state of Florida. And on top of that, HB5, banning the right for an opportunity for a woman's right to choose, a pregnancy ban or an abortion ban at 15 weeks. That legislation, HB5, restricts a woman's right to make her own decisions regarding her body. Democrats attempted to amend the anti-immigration legislation by including exemptions for Ukrainian refugees, for example. And amendments were filed on the anti-choice bill, including lifting the abortion ban for victims of rape, incest, or human trafficking. However, every one of our amendments was rejected. Also on Thursday, it was the voice of Floridians that was under threat as the Republicans took up Senate Bill 1352/House Bill 921. This is legislation that would severely hinder the ability of citizens to change the Constitution through the ballot initiative process. Now, remember, it was through the citizens' initiative processes that Floridians were able to overcome the legislature's failure to legalize medical marijuana, raise the minimum wage, and restore voting rights, just to name a few things that it would be very impossible to do under this new legislation. Nearly impossible. Now, for the average citizen, accomplishing these things is a great deal, and sometimes we need support. This bill, which passed in the House, is now pending in the Senate after we had questions on the legislation on Friday. The week ended much as it began, with unnecessary and unhelpful legislation that does very little to address major pocketbook issues that are facing Floridians here in the state of Florida. We're seeing increasing rents. Skyrocketing rents here in the state of Florida, and property insurance is going through the roof. Here we go again, dealing with elections. Senate Bill 524. Now, this bill is another restrictive bill with regard to the elections process. This bill creates the governor's police force to deal directly with quote unquote voter fraud. It also adds changes to the popular vote by mail options. Now, this was approved by the full Senate along partisan lines. Finally, the budget process began winding down. This week, negotiations were moved or bumped to the conference chairs to complete. Under the Constitution, a finalized spending plan must be completed by Tuesday to allow for a 72-hour cooling off period prior to the final vote by session's end, which is on Friday, March 11th. The other constitutional requirements the legislature met this week concerned redistricting. As you may remember, the drawing of new state legislative and congressional district lines is done once every 10 years, according to the latest census numbers. This week we found out that the courts approved both the Senate and the House maps, while the congressional maps ended up coming back to the legislature to be voted on due to a clause or an issue with the governor's meddling. The governor's influence and intent appears to be on diminishing the ability of minority voters to retain their participation in the democratic process, while boosting the number of Republicans in Congress. Clearly, the governor has made an unconstitutional move. Now, if there was a bright spot this week, it was on Wednesday. A very special guest was Dr. Roger Duncan III. He was our doctor of the day. An anesthesiologist, Dr. Duncan is the vice chief of anesthesia at Palms West Hospital and the immediate past president of the Palm Beach County Medical Society. Now, it was my honor to have him join us for the day in the Florida Senate. Thank you, Dr. Duncan. Now, I'm also proud to announce the Senate passage this week of my legislation, Senate Bill 226. Now, this bill provides financial assistance to handlers of retired law enforcement dogs that have served our communities. Now, these dogs typically develop a number of health issues as they age, some of them from injuries that they suffered while they were in service. And it's been an important piece of legislation, so thank you all for the support, and I would ask that you can still go and co-sponsor the bill if you'd like, but I would ask for your favorable support of this good bill. All right, everyone, thank you for watching another edition of the Powell Press. Please like, share, comment, and make sure that you can catch us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all other forms of social media. I am so proud to represent you in Senate District 30 and throughout the state of Florida. Please join us on next week for the final week of session, which is the 9th week, as we give you the final update of the 2022 legislative session, reminding you that a life of service is a life that counts. And we'll see you next week.